The world is currently witnessing two devastating wars, the war between Israel and Hamas and the war between Russia and Ukraine. In the latest, UK and other northern European allies have announced a new military support package for Ukraine. A package worth $123 million aimed at assisting Ukraine's armed forces, maintaining vehicles and protecting key infrastructure. Now, these wars have brought to fore deep divisions in the global community. To discuss this, we have with us Professor David Dunn from UK. He is Professor for International Politics at the University of Birmingham. Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Professor, as I mentioned, the world is witnessing two wars at the moment. To begin with, how do you assess the larger impact of these wars?
Well, just now, the shock attack on Israel has been noticeable for the barbarity and the civilian casualties of the attack. But the really big and important question is what happens next in terms of how that impacts the wider world. Because there is an expectation that Israel will try and root out Hamas from the Gaza Strip. It may be a full occupation of that. And the concern there is that would bring in Hezbollah from Lebanon and possibly Iran directly into the conflict. The US has placed a carrier battle group in the Eastern Mediterranean trying to deter such things. But if Iran or Lebanon get involved in the war, then that war becomes a much bigger deal, especially with Iran, especially if Russia tries to deepen its relationship with Iran in terms of the supply of weapons and information intelligence between the two powers. So there is a prospect of a wider and possibly even joint conflagration following from the attack on Israel. This will have an impact on oil prices. This will have an impact on the movement of shipping more broadly. And there is a concern that this will have an impact also on the US presidential election next year. And of course, there's also a link to the attempts by Israel to form a peace treaty with Saudi Arabia that now looks much less likely. And of course, that was partly why Hamas launched these attacks in the first place. So there are lots of different ripples because the international system is interconnected. Precisely how it develops further, we haven't yet seen because we haven't really entered the second stage of this war yet.
Right, sir. Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday, in fact, even linked the assault by Hamas on Israel with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, criticized Iran over both conflicts. Could you please elucidate on this?
Well, absolutely. So Russia has been reliant on the supply of long-range drones from Iran. In a setup in Russia, a factory for the manufacture of Iranian drones. So Iran has been facilitating the bombardment of Ukrainian cities by these terror weapons. And in the same way, Iran has supplied lots of the terror weapons that were used, 5,000 in the initial assault by Hezbollah into Israel. Iran, as I say, sees itself as a major regional power, and Iran was opposed to the coming together of Israel and the Gulf Arab states, particularly Saudi Arabia, in the Abraham Accords, and therefore sought to derail that by facilitating and encouraging Hamas to attack Israel in the way that it has done. And as I say, the Americans are keen to actually deter a wider war or to deter Iran responding when Israel likely goes into the Gaza Strip to try and root out the Hamas terrorist groups and free its hostages from the Gaza Strip. So Iran is a clear provocator in the war with Israel, and it's a major facilitator of Russia's war against Ukraine.
And Ukraine is also preparing for a tough winter ahead, for which it needs to fully equip its arsenal. How do you think things will unfold as winter approaches?
Well, the problem with that Ukraine faces is uncertainty of supply of weapons from the US Congress, because America's government is currently non-functional and dysfunctional in terms of its inability to pass any laws because of the problems with the House of Representatives. So it's running out of American aid. The Northern Europeans have stepped in with this aid package, which is partly symbolic, saying, yes, we can supply aid to Ukraine on an ongoing basis. But there is evidence of aid fatigue in Eastern Europe, in the United States, and that is a major concern for the Ukrainians. That said, the aid is still flowing, and they have been given massive amounts of that. And it's to be hoped that the Americans can sort out their petty politics, frankly, and get the aid back on track. But having another war in the system is a distraction for Ukraine and a complication to the geopolitics more broadly.
So, do you think there's any hope for a possible ceasefire? What would you say are the larger objectives of both the sides?
There is little prospect of a ceasefire with Israel and Hamas, simply because the violence in the Israeli views needs to be avenged. They also need to free their hostages, and they need to, in their view, destroy the ability of Hamas to conduct similar attacks again. So I think that the Israelis have always practiced an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and therefore they're promising a major military response to this. Just how wide that war goes is yet to be seen. On the Ukrainian and the Russian front, neither side see a prospect of a ceasefire and peace, because both think that they have advantage in continuing the war, because they both want to gain territory. Ukraine wants to gain back its sovereign territory, and Russia wants to gobble up and imperially conquer more of Ukraine. So there's no prospect of peace in either of the two conflicts.
All right. Professor Dunn, thank you so much for joining us on WION with your insights on this.
It's a pleasure.